everybody. Miss Dumas here, and we are continuing on with our review of Unit 5, Revolutions. And today we're going to focus on economic revolutions, more specifically changes in economic systems as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So we'll start by talking about what economic system is in place prior to the Industrial Revolution, and then what economic systems are created as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So let's get started. So at the beginning of the 1700s, mercantilism is the system that is in place. And the whole goal of a mercantilist system is to make as much money for your king or queen in the mother country as possible, which means you want to maximize exports and minimize imports. You want to bring as much money into your country as possible, and you don't want to spend money at all if possible. And the way to do that is to use your colonial possessions or your colonies. And so a country like England, who set up colonies in North America, would purchase raw materials from their colonies at a relatively inexpensive price. They take those raw materials or natural resources back to jolly old England and make manufactured products out of them, and then force the colonies to buy the manufactured products from their mother country. But then England could sell products to any other country on the face of the planet that they wanted to. And this does bring a tremendous amount of wealth into the mother countries because A, they always have a cheap supply of raw materials, super important, and they always have built-in markets to sell their products. So this was making countries like England and France and their kings or queens a lot of money, but it wasn't exactly fair to the colonies. It wasn't a fair system to individuals, which we'll talk about more later. And so, like we said, this was a result of colonization. You only get a set, continually replenishing source of raw materials with colonies, and you can only have fixed markets if you have colonies as well. So you can absolutely see that countries like England and France and Spain wanted to keep colonization going as long as possible to keep the country wealthy. But all this is going to change as a result of the Industrial Revolution. And hopefully you guys remember that as a result of colonization and the new food sources coming into Europe, population just skyrockets. It's like a Roman candle during the 4th of July, and production methods could not keep up with the population boom. Traditional cottage industries could not produce enough products to meet the needs and the demands of the people. And since the population wasn't going to stop growing, then we had to figure out how are we going to increase production. And this starts with the textile industry. You have inventors who are like, how do we make more cloth? How do we do this? And so they think and they think, and they come up with ideas like the water frame, like the spinning jenny, like the power loom that's going to take raw cotton, spin it into thread faster, and then take that thread and weave it into cloth faster. And it actually works, right? It increases the amount of textiles that can be produced in a shorter amount of time. The problem is to create these machines, it's really expensive, and these are really, really big machines. And that being said, you can't really house them in traditional houses. You've got to find other ways or other places to put these machines in order to get them to work. And this leads to the rise of factories. Now, all of this is super, super expensive. Okay, it's a great idea, but it isn't cheap. And the government can't afford it because the government's too busy worrying about their colonies. And so what ends up happening is you have what we call entrepreneurs or investors who have made money off colonization, and they decide to invest in this new technology. So they're going to pay John Smith to create new, thread weaving technology, or they're going to, create, well, it wouldn't be a girl because it's the Industrial Revolution, because God forbid, anyway, longer. Different story. So you have investors who are going to give money to whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's inventors, to make their machines or build their factories or start a railroad, whatever it may be, in order to increase this industrial production. And it's kind of like what we see with companies today. Let's say you wanted to invest in Apple. Apple's got this new product that's coming out, and it's going to take a lot of money to be able to create it, right? Money that not a single person can give. And so Apple solicits investors and says, okay, here's the deal for, $500 per share of stock. You can own some of Apple. So I'm like, oh, own some of Apple. I know I've got an Apple product addiction, so all right, I'm in. And so what I do is I buy, say, 10 shares of stock at $500 a piece, so $5,000. So I give a check to Apple. Oh, you guys don't even know what a check is, right? So I Venmo Apple $5,000, and they're going to use that money to start creating this new product. And they've got millions of investors all over the world, right, who are willing to buy more stock in order to get this new product. So I own 10 shares, which is awesome, but if there's like 10 million shares of stock, it's not that cool. But with the goal of at the end of the year, when this product is released and everybody starts to buy it, that I'm going to make actually money off my investment. So let's say the end of the year comes, Apple releases this new product, it sells like gangbusters, and the Apple company makes a tremendous amount of profit by the end of the year. Now, I get some of that profit because I invested in the company with my $5,000. So let's say for every share that you invested, the profit was $100. Okay. So at the end of the year, I bought 10 shares of stock, $5,000. I get $100 extra per share. So I invested $5,000, but I get $5,500 back. Okay, or no, what, 6,000 back because I bought 10 shares. So I earned $1,000. I made $1,000 profit by investing in this company. And that's what these investors do to start the Industrial Revolution. The government's too involved in colonization. They don't have the money or time to do this. So private individuals do this, invest in the company, and that's how this all gets off the ground. And so that's how we start factories and this new technology and railroads. All of this starts with individuals. And the goal of capitalism is to make a profit. You don't want your company to go bankrupt. You want to make a profit. Okay. And so because this is a system where individuals own the natural resources, they own the ideas, they have the money, this is all privately run businesses with no government involvement whatsoever. It's called a free market economy. And the Industrial Revolution creates capitalism. And it does make some people very, very wealthy. If you are an inventor, you get wealthy. If you are an investor, you get wealthy. If you are a factory owner, you get wealthy. If you're higher up in the company, you get wealthy. The problem is the people making the products, the factory workers, don't get wealthy. And this is going to lead to another economic system, which is called Marxism. So after the Industrial Revolution goes on for a while, and we have what's called untethered capitalism, which means there is no government involvement whatsoever. Companies can do whatever they want to do in order to make a profit. If that means you're only going to pay people 10 cents an hour to work, then so be it, right? Because if someone's like, well, I don't want to work for 10 cents an hour, the factory's like, fine, you're fired. There are 1,000 other people waiting for your job. In untethered capitalism, you don't have to worry about safety requirements in the factory. If someone cuts off their leg, you just toss them out of the factory, fire them, and bring someone else in. So untethered capitalism is really, really, really bad. But that's what we see at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And as a result of this, you have guys like Karl Marx who's like, this is not how it's supposed to be, right? This lack of government regulation completely, this is not how economic systems should run. So what he says is this, is that if you want society progress or societal progress, tying it back to the Enlightenment, everybody, okay, you can't just let profit sit in the hands of the few, right? And he acknowledges it. He's like, yes, the inventor is super important because they came up with the idea. And yes, the investor is super important because they had the money to make all of this happen and create these jobs. But the worker is important too, because without the worker, you get no products. You could have a great invention in a great factory, but if you have nobody to make the products, it's not going to matter. And so what he wants to see is the workers get more of the profits. Share the profit equally. Okay? The inventor is as important as the investor, who's as important as the factory worker. Share those profits equally. Make people equal, right? And he says, if you don't do this, if you don't create a more fair economic system, the workers, who vastly outnumber everybody else, are going to rise up in rebellion and overtake the whole system. So unless you want that revolution to occur, you create a more fair economic system, hence Marxism. And it makes sense, right? I mean, it does. At some level, everybody's involved in the production of these goods, even out the profits a little bit. But that is not how everybody saw it. You are going to get a struggle between, say, the entrepreneurs and the investors and the workers, right? The workers feel, dude, I make the product, I deserve a lot of the profit. You would make no money if we didn't make the profit, so we are just as valuable as you. And you had people like the inventors who are like, no, you're not, right? I'm the one who came up with this idea. Without this idea, nothing else exists. So I am more important and I deserve more money. And then you have factory management, or like the factory owners who are like, that's great that you had an awesome idea and that's great that you make the product, but if I didn't create the factory, nothing would happen. And so you have struggles between these different groups who believe they are entitled to more profit than others. And so this is where we get the big struggle between capitalism and Marxism that we kind of still see today in society. Right? Now, we don't really have any complete capitalist economies anymore, and we really, well, even China, no. That's another story too. We don't really have any complete Marxist or communist economies anymore. It's more of a mix now. But this is where it all starts as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So, while at the beginning of the 1700s, we start with mercantilism, by the end of the 1700s into the 1800s, we have brand new economic systems, capitalism and Marxism, as a result of the Industrial Revolution. Now, if you want to learn even more about the capitalist socialist struggle, we have an awesome video that you guys can watch that's at the end of this PowerPoint on Marxism and socialism. But before we get to that, I want you to stop and ask yourself this question. What do you think? What economic system do you believe in more, capitalism or Marxism, and why? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for listening to me. As always, if you have any questions and or concerns and or comments, please feel free to email me. Other than that, I will see you next time.